clock's ticked down apparently. Good evening, Councillor. I can't say good evening, members of the public, since there are none.
It's just us again.
Apologies for absence. There is one from Councillor Glenn. Do you accept Councillor Glenn's apologies?
Normally we go to the pub afterwards, so it's a shame. He's not here.
Representations of interested parties, presumably none. Declarations of interest. Any disclosable pecuniary interests, anyone?
No.
Any other interests?
No.
The minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd September were circulated. Present were myself, Councillor Chesser, Councillor Clark, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Neville Oakes, Councillor Silloaks, Councillor Peel, Councillor Robinson and Councillor Stagg, on the basis that there was an invitation extended to the entire council to attend. Anyone wish to propose those as a true record? Councillor Fuller, seconded I think by Councillor Chesser. All those in favour? Good. Those. Right, on to the planning applications, and we start not a million miles from this building with the Abbott House residential home with vehicular access.
Okay, it says historic for that reason. It's because it's the old one and not the new one, that's all.
Fair enough.
Okay, the application is a joint one by NCC and Andal School, which is an interesting concept. And this is the site from the original application, and the reason this has come up simply is because they run out of time, so they need to resubmit it. The original application was submitted in February 2015, and from what I've been able to ascertain, there haven't been any changes.
Anybody remember what we said in February 2015? Because I must admit, I didn't go as far as trying to work out when we'd looked at it, because there wasn't a date on here, and I just couldn't bear the thought of ploughing through millions of minutes to try and find it.
Is it the same number?
I doubt it, because it will be this year's number, because it's effectively a reapplication, isn't it? So the short answer is probably not.
Do you think it would have been discussed in 2000? It would have been discussed in...
It was granted in February 15, and it's got a 14 number, so probably at the very end of 14, perhaps December 14.
I'll just see if I can do a quick search.
Whilst Clark's seeing if we can actually find the record of our previous discussions.
I don't think we.
Anybody got any view?
I don't think we objected to it.
It's not impacting on anything but
It's
obviously.
not.
Not found.
There were a couple of comments from I think people like highlights, sort of visibility displays and stuff like that. But that was pretty well easy.
So they're not opposed to it in principle, only a question of the detail of what it does.
Yep.
These are the minutes from February 2015, and that's all we've got.
Well, it's two words.
Nothing.
And one is no,
Yeah.
and the other one is objection.
I mean, I'm assuming that would be for the same thing in March 2015.
It's the same.
It looks like it, looking at that.
No problem.
So it doesn't look as if we objected then. Nobody seems to have come up with any reason for changing our mind. So let's just say no objection and move on to 7 Danfords, demolition and rebuilding of retaining boundary walls.
Right. It's actually 6 and 7. I don't know quite what they said just.
Can we stop chatting over there so that we can actually hear what's being said? Thanks.
Okay. It actually is both 6 and 7. I don't quite know why they just picked on 6. It's possible 7. It's possible because that person might own number 6. I don't know. But I thought I'd put this up first. I usually put this up a bit later on, but I think think that sort of would assuage an awful lot of concerns that people might have.
So they're really working hard at keeping it as it should be.
Absolutely.
It's probably just falling down a bit, isn't it, and replacing like for like.
Doesn't look like it, doesn't it?
Well, as far as I can work out, that's exactly what they're trying to do. But here's the, all looks a bit, it's not terribly easy to see the existing and the new. And fundamentally, the new is extremely the same, or very much the same as the original. So,
No.
Well, on the basis that it appears to be a like for like, it would seem pretty difficult to come up with a reason to object, would it not?
well, the only thing I would say is it is in a conservation area.
Is it in the conservation area?
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
But having said that, given that it is broadly a like
If there's
for
only
like,
one set on, you might want to change. That's
brighter still.
I think what, see, because they're censored, once they're
Okay,
on,
I just thought it was
because we're in here.
paint on it.
Yeah.
Well, it may be in the conservation area, but on the other hand, it doesn't seem to look as if it'll have a fundamentally different look to what it does now.
No.
So,
The only observation I make is that we won't want to put our usual caveat.
on the basis that
And
it
that
should
it's
be
a
referred
great,
to the conservation office.
yeah, it's grade 2 listed and it's in the conservation area.
I mean, it's not a listed building consent, having said that.
No, it's not.
But as it's in the conservation area, so no objection subject to any contrary view of the conservation officer. Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. Okay.
44 East Road, garden storage shed, main door moved, new open porch, front elevation rendered, etc.
Quite a lot of documents, but I'll boil this one down. That's where it is.
Yeah.
You can see the footpath that goes through from East Road through to Mason's Close. That's a slightly more detailed, and you can see the shape of it.
Cheers.
Next, we have the site plans. And this is what is existing, and the small little square
At the end.
at the end, at the moment, is a shed. But the pros are more or less going to turn it into a pseudo studio. And that's what they're proposing. You can see that there's an additional piece south of the main dwelling on the right-hand side, if you look from East Road.
Yeah.
There's a bit at the back, which, obviously is an extension.
So make it bigger, that shed.
Basically, I don't know what else to say about it, to be perfectly honest.
Not a lot, really, is there?
Elevations proposed, there we go. And you can see the number of things about. They call it a garden storage shed, and I looked at it a bit closely, it didn't look like a shed, it looked like an office.
Is it? How many stories is it?
Well,
Yeah, that's right.
No objections from the neighbours?
no, not as far as I'm aware, with my usual caveat.
No.
I mean, in actual fact, I think it probably would improve it. Looking at the elevations in particular. But they're tasteful.
I mean, just an observation, it's nothing to do with the quality of the application itself, but of course the one problem with a site plan like that is that it gives you no idea of the proximity of the new extension to any building that happens to be on the next plot along.
There is a gap.
Having just been consulted earlier today by a client who's upset that somebody's built an extension about 3 inches from his property and has managed to bridge the damp course, causing huge problems to his property. It does make me wonder.
No, you've got that footpath.
But in fact,
So there is a gap
it's
between
okay.
it
Yeah.
and the next one.
It's one probably on the other side of mine.
42.
Yeah.
But there's a gap. I'm looking at a satellite.
I hear no sounds of any objection to that.
So you've got this
I
one.
didn't quite think it was on the other side.
Yeah. They're doing that shed and they're doing that house. It's a double.
overwhelming. Is there a thing about the shed might be turned into a house later?
No.
A
Don't
granny
have
flat,
that. I can promise you that will definitely be doing that.
like some Mrs. Toilet or something maybe.
And outside bath.
Right. I think we'll call that no objection and move on to 19 Milton Road. A tree,
Another tree. Oh, that's our first tree.
but not a very exciting tree.
No.
Right.
I've been taking photos of this tree in the rain today.
Oh, thank you very much.
The things you
Devotion
do.
above and beyond.
I got wet 3 times.
You can see the tree. I'm trying to show it.
That's the
And that's the blue dot, of course.
To admit,
And just to,
what happens to
if you
it
go-
on the eye?
if you go up a bit and go left a bit, you'll see that square, and that's that rather
It's
nice
just arses.
building that apparently might have been used for love trysts.
What's it called, David? That,
I can't remember the name of it.
like a tower. It's like a folly.
Yes, it's the Follies next. Yeah, you mean,
In St. A's?
yeah, so a Folly,
Yeah, it is a
the
folly.
smoking room, or the games room, wasn't
Okay.
There's all sorts of things, but I was dredging things up for my memory because I have had to look at that quite
it? That's a
simply.
colleagues, that's an ex-colleagues of ours.
All right.
But
We
okay,
do
so
have a
there we are.
photograph of
That's
it.
the tree.
Yeah, it's a habit.
Is it coming?
We do.
It's a big tree, actually.
There we
It's
are.
a huge.
But you can
I
see,
didn't tell no one.
right, you see, the other thing you can see is the proximity to the school chapel.
It's opposite, really, isn't it?
It's pretty opposite. And do you like for me? On request?
That's a big, yeah.
So
Nasty.
its trunk
Here we go.
is in the house garden, the house here.
Oh, well taken, yes.
But most of the tree
Is it laundry?
is in London.
That's
But
it.
that's
No,
just,
it overhangs the track.
it's the
That's
track though, isn't it? It's not on any buildings. It's just the where the delivery vans go. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it London with that one?
Say no,
St.
St.
A's.
No. It's not long.
St.
No.
Anne's.
Oh, no, that's me, I got it wrong. Say no.
I know we often have issues about the removal of trees, but I have a suspicion that with this particular tree in that location, we're probably quite sympathetic to the application.
It's probably damaging the wall, isn't it?
But if it isn't yet, I think it will do it.
It looks a
Before
bit less on that right-hand picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the tree must be much newer than the property.
Yeah.
So-
Yes.
It's probably just an overgrown hedge anyway.
The other thing I'd say is, I mean, look at how many other trees are around there.
No, it's not.
It's not as if it's going to denude.
It's not like it's treeless.
Certainly not.
No good.
No objection, everyone?
No.
No,
I think it's going to protect the house.
So you're going to put something to the use of the tree, obviously.
Right, on to West Street, 62, single-storey extension, new doorway, removal of window and door, insertion of single conservation roof window.
Right. This is a very, well, it's quite an interesting building actually. But there it is. And I do my usual thing, I go around the satellite, I always like to see.
Very like satellites, it tells you the story, doesn't it?
There it is.
What's it opposite?
Star.
Oh, the Star, yeah, it's got the cinema there. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a very interesting street, West Street.
It is. I've actually been down here and looked at other applications on the left, well, slightly south of the site, and other ones. There's been quite a lot of planning apps down there. Existing plans and elevations, I'd like to actually put them side by side, but it was a bit difficult. So what we got, you can see it's better. Probably the south elevation is the one that's the greatest interest, because they're not intending to do anything to the front. They probably couldn't anyway. It's on the street scene and it's a great two-listed building. Okay. These is what we're proposing.
Is it an infill?
Sorry?
Is it infilling?
Is it?
infilling.
Where? What?
Just the back of the house, is it just filling in a bit of the house?
Looks like
Yeah.
It's like an L and they've just filled in the...
filled in the gap
Yeah.
between the two bits.
I'm just seeing if I'm
Just
not.
changing the doorways and
There we go. This way now.
Oh yeah, that's better.
So that's the bit they're going to put in there.
Well, they're going to fill that bit in. I'll
Just
show you
wants
another
to
bit in a minute.
It's good.
If you, well, I'll show you another one. Let's see it just a sec. You can probably just about make out some red squares and red tabs.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can see that. Well, that's really where most of the work is going to be will take place. So it won't affect the street scene. It really is trying to improve the quality of living in the property. And they're actually trying to maybe get back a little bit more to its original state, because a lot of that stuff is, as you can see, is 20th century.
Fair enough.
Well, if you just looked at those photographs and nobody had mentioned the words listed building, the last thing you'd have actually thought was that it was a listed building, which perhaps tells you everything you need to know, I think, about that.
I agree.
I've got no objection.
The next one's the same, it's the same.
Yes, well, I think the next one, the listed building
I might
considered.
put both of them on there because there's no point in doing
It's the same one, isn't it?
It's the same thing, one is just
they
the
just
full
add a
one's
little
listed.
bit, that's
I mean, this seems like a classic no objection subject to any contrary view of the
I was going to
conservation
say
process.
that, yes.
I wondered if that would come up.
I think it might.
Yeah.
Right, well, let's
Well,
say exactly that.
That's the best slide of the night.
Well done.
Well, they were relatively painless applications this evening. When one looks at the various planning outcomes, you'll see that there were quite a lot of comment in terms of what we were saying in response to them, and you'll notice that at the bottom of each and every one of them the word granted appears. Although not one of them was one which we actually objected to, it was more that we were making various comments in connection with it. But there they are for what it's worth. And the next item on the agenda, very staggeringly considering the time, is planning appeals, which says none. Now the next item on the agenda had been to discuss a letter that we'd received from Caroline Tent with regard to open space provision on the applied for new development of St Christopher's Drive. After this agenda had been published, we got precisely the same thing in relation to the St Peter's Road, Cottescott Road development. We've contacted ENC. They have granted an extension which will enable these matters to be dealt with in full council rather than in the planning committee, which was likely to turn into another planning committee plus.
Yeah.
Given that it is, that gives us two options. One is, in a sense, to have a debate around it tonight and make some sort of a recommendation to full council, and the other is to say, let's just wait and have that discussion in full council in due course. This is always slightly tricky. I know it says, as it were, you can comment on this without prejudice to any other position you may have taken, i.e. we do not want either of these developments. But it's going to be, we do not want either of these developments, but if you inflict them upon us, then this is what we're now saying. I did send an email the other day about a query. I don't know whether you've got an answer yet.
No, I haven't.
Right, well that's another reason for perhaps deferring it. I had an idea about something linked in fact to the St Peter's Road, Cottescott Road development that we might potentially be able to ask for some money for that would be of direct assistance to the council and the town. I'm not absolutely sure that it meets the criteria, but it might be worth bouncing it off ENC and asking them if they think it would meet the criteria. So that's something we can't talk about until full council anyway, by which time hopefully we have an answer. My instinct is to say, particularly since the opportunity to finish potentially comparatively early tonight is in front of us, that we might as well defer this to full council, but if people are anxious for a discussion, I would hate to silence people. Right.
That's fine.
Nobody is bursting to do that, so we will defer it. Which brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which I have to say I have absolutely no idea why it's appeared on the planning agenda. If you've sort of looked at the paperwork and everything else, whilst I suppose what is proposed will ultimately have a planning issue, because part of what is proposed is to convert the existing block in such a way as to add in a retail facility.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, given that it's talking about an asset of considerable significance to this town council and the town, it does seem to me that this sits rather better in full council.
I think so.
Whether, having said that, and thinking about what I just commented on the last one, if as a planning committee we had any view on the planning aspects of what is being discussed, and I accept we haven't got a full application, there's not a planning application before us, it's a kind of a, almost like a pre-planning application in a sense, in as much as they're asking for our view on a disposal, amongst other things, bearing in mind the extraordinary cost of actually fully renovating it, if I can call it that. But whether we want to take a view as a planning committee about that aspect, or whether we say no, we ought to form a view in principle about whether the council is in favour of the possibility of a disposal and worry about a planning application as and when it hits us. I'm open to suggestions.
I think the thing is, if it goes to full council and full council says no, we want to keep them as they are, you're not going to get a planning application.
We're not going to get a planning application,
And
we
that
would
would
have
be-
wasted our time this evening.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that that's actually code from the clerk for let's not discuss that tonight. A view with which I'm
There's a wire just there.
Okay, sorry, thanks, David. I'm just going to take the television off.
It's okay, leave it.
That's
The only comment I have on that is that somewhere along the line we've got to make sure that it stays as a public
No,
toilet.
that's what I was thinking. We have to
No,
put it in there.
because it's the short end, the very thin end of a very big wedge.
and yes.
Whether we need to talk about that now, but it's a
I
comment.
think
that needs
but that I
saying.
think would be a lease issue, that we would then lease the toilets. We would have some lease that would then enable them to stay. as
Even if it
toilets
was a
for the next
999-year
99
lease,
Yeah.
we could then ensure that throughout that period it was available as
Mm.
Public toilet,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
So I think that can be achieved,
of course.
but it's a very worthwhile point to have made.
And would it affect, or does it affect, do we have to worry about the funeral home anymore?
I was
Or
going
is
to
that
say
gone?
that.
I must admit, exactly the same.
A retail outlet there.
Yeah.
And
The thought did cross my mind. I think the position, as far as I'm aware, is that that application still awaits determination by ENC, because I haven't seen it.
Well, I know, but then somebody said to me, I think it was Deborah actually, in the car, she said that they've already started doing internal works, which maybe they've already started doing things in there.
Well, if that's
half of the
if
course.
that's the information we've got, could I ask you to contact ENC
Yeah.
and find out, has there been a decision? If so, why haven't we been told about it? And if the decision is no,
What are they doing?
can the enforcement team look at whatever is going on there?
Exactly.
Right. Yes, I can see.
This land is just the bit that we'll walk over when we're going to get to our cars.
Hmm.
I think they just want to pave it or something.
I don't know what.
Pave it
Why is
entirely.
it?
Well, I think it would make, if that's where the toilets are going to be, it would be easier for people, it would be nicer for people to walk through to them.
What are they getting at?
What was
A
their business?
facility to sell
Product.
cleaning products to businesses.
So quite a massive advertising.
Which sounds a bit
Fair enough, that's fair enough.
But when the bill comes in to refurbish them at £30,000, it's
You can begin to see
It
why
almost-
ENC made the decision it did. But
Are
anyway,
you sure it's not clean foreshore rusky?
And they are going to put an electric charging point
That's
at the rear of the building.
I'm happy with that.
they've got it too, I think.
Which is what they're,
can I suggest that we simply
Move on,
defer talking about this? Because actually, once you start, there's an
You end
awful
up
lot that
going
you
you
could get
can
into.
unpick this forever, I think.
And I have no idea what view full council may take of that. Effectively, the last item on the agenda is a sort of multiple item. and it's to look at various documents. We had that on the agenda last time, as you may recall, but because of the length of that last meeting, because we had a couple of planning applications that took a little time, we deferred everything. The documents are the planning guidance document, which we've had for a long time, and this is a version 2 of it. Then the what's called a response guidance document, which I think is actually the one to do with retrospective planning applications. No, that's the retrospective planning applications one, the third one. Then various policies to do with graffiti, A-boards and other structures, fly posting, illuminated signs, and some guidance on advertising. So far as the first document is concerned, it is approximately, I would have thought, somewhere between about 95 and 97% exactly the same document as before. But when I had occasion to look at it, it struck me that amongst other things, we still had within it two things that the council had long since resolved were no longer part of our plans. One was the relief road, and the other was a sports hall. And in the context of community infrastructure levy, when we were thinking about that, we had developed this kind of wish list in which those items were originally on. Then the council decided that they shouldn't be on, but somehow in terms of the planning guidance document, because it never did get reviewed, they stayed there. So that's come out. And the other principal change is to do with the neighbourhood plan, given that it's somewhat further advanced than it was in 2013, but unfortunately still not there yet, which I don't think anybody would have envisaged back in 2013. It now simply refers to the draft annual neighbourhood plan, sets out in detail our vision for future development, and it's to be read in conjunction with the design statement, and then it just goes on. I don't know whether people have indeed looked through this. Some of you will clearly have been familiar with it from its initial iteration. It may be that we want to amend certain things in this. I know that at least some of the items in here we've actually used as part of our argument in relation to certain current planning applications. For example, the references to the water treatment plant and its proximity to a potential development site, and we've cited our own planning guidance to say that we were opposed to it. So, does anybody have any comments on it?
No.
Or are we simply going to adopt it in its new style? It's a document which we can always revisit if at any point any councillor thinks that we should be changing it or adding to it. We can of course do so.
That's fine.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Good. I have to say I'm completely baffled as to what actually reconsideration of a previous response guidance document is, but I suspect that it's the document about policies affecting the conservation area, because it simply comes up next in our pack. This hasn't been altered at all. It is exactly as it always was, and simply on the basis that we were looking at a whole raft of these things, I thought that we ought to actually put this out there as well. It really has to be read in conjunction with the planning guidance document, and you will see it has certain policies to which we have sometimes made reference, e.g. solar panels in the conservation area, and various things to do with internally and externally illuminated signs. And as you will have noticed slightly later on, they're actually repeated in a separate document, partially because they kind of sat neatly into a row of documents to do with advertising in various forms and notices. Again, that's our current set of policies. If people have no particular comments or changes, then we leave it as is.
Do we put in the Turkish barbers poll?
He hasn't gone yet.
Retrospective planning applications guidance document. Again, this was introduced some time ago. It's exactly the same. It's only on there to remind people that it exists and to ask if we want to continue to endorse it as part of our policy. I think that we have been in the habit of referring to this now on any suitable application.
It's probably the one that referred to the most often.
It probably, sadly, is. And indeed, you've only got to look at our minutes and see that we were repeating ourselves constantly, because it appeared that several of the planning applications we looked at previously, people had jumped the gun somewhat.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
Who's online?
I think I've actually jumped two. One of them is the policy on retrospective planning applications, and another one, and again it's something we introduced in a specific situation. I think it was only last year. Supplement to the planning guidance, request a committee to reconsider a previous response to a planning application. Some councillors may recall that we had a rather vexed situation in which we decided we would take a look at a particular thing again. Admittedly, after we looked at it, we didn't change our minds, but that created a situation in which we thought it might be appropriate to draw up that. So again, that's an existing document, and all I'm really inviting people to say is, are we happy that it continues as is?
Yeah.
Good, that's the easy bits done. There are then a series of policies on various things which may or may not exercise us a little bit more, certainly in terms of anything that might involve expense. And certainly if one looks at the policy on the removal of graffiti, since it talks about what we would do if in fact the graffiti was on one of our own buildings and response times and so on, it does commit us to certain things, although I tried to draft it in such a way as to give us a certain amount of wiggle room. Some of these policies, I have to say, I have managed to borrow bits from elsewhere, and I have a feeling that this document might have come out of Tame, which is interesting because Tame was somewhere that produced a neighbourhood plan that we also spent a certain amount of time looking at when we were looking at ours not so long ago. But does anybody have any comments on A, what is there, and B, whether we should have a policy on it at all?
Policy on it would be good, because you've told people what it is. We can use it when we need it.
Something that's missing on the A-boards one.
Right, can we do that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through them in order really. So the first one was on graffiti. And
Happy with it?
everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have something like that.
Good.
Yeah.
You need it so you've got something that you can lean on.
I mean, those sort of things as well could you push up on our website. Certainly, I found some of the basis for some of the things I've done here from there. The next one is indeed A-boards and other structures, as it's called on the highway. And Councillor Chesser, you had an observation on something that...
Yeah, does that
isn't
tie
covered.
with the latest from the county? Because we were having an awful problem getting highways input into this, weren't we, originally? Because I know there's normally they have one about the distance from the property, that you can only have an A-board relating to your business.
Yes, 1.5
Yeah.
But
metres.
it's a bit vague on this one, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it does say the depth
They had a
extending.
specific
1.5
distance,
metres.
yeah.
It does say 1.5 metres in a couple of places.
Yeah.
As I say, I borrowed it. One of the things we might want to do, assuming that we adopt these in principle, is obviously to then go to either ENC or county, as the case may be, and say, this is our policy on. However,
Do it that way
if
around.
there's something in here that we ought to be changing, then please tell us.
Yeah.
There might be some central
I
stuff
think Lisa has.
We did get something.
I think I may have asked Lisa
She's
to
done
do
this, and
that.
we've had no feedback from either.
in which case it might be worth.
Uh,
Well, on the basis that we haven't,
Yeah.
let's make a decision about it tonight, and then we can go back to them and say, well, look, we didn't get any feedback in
That's what we've
advance,
done.
we've done it. However, if
Just
you're going to
check
tell
that.
us that we shouldn't be doing something or we should change it, then please can you tell us now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because otherwise we start to publicise this stuff one way or another.
Yeah, that's promising.
We'll trip ourselves up.
So, anybody seen anything in there that they're unhappy with, or
No,
think there's anything in there that perhaps is missing?
happy.
Fly posting, well, it kind of speaks for itself.
I love the thought of a motorist colliding with a fly post. I think that's fine.
Yes,
Funny
I'm-
comment.
I mean, it depends on your definition of fly posting.
Yes, I know.
To a degree.
One of the things.
But if you think, for example, about the roundabout as you join the 605 by the riverside, the number of times that you actually see a structure in the sense that people have put poles in and they've put
Yeah.
a banner across. Now, okay, most of those poles, if you collided with it on a cycle, you're not likely to do much damage to yourself or your cycle, and certainly not in a motor vehicle. But supposing somebody got a bit more ambitious and put a metal pole in there and somebody hit it, that would be a rather different issue, wouldn't it?
That's fair enough. It was just a nice comment. It's good that it's in there, to be honest.
Personally, I think this is another one we could
Stay
send
in
back
the
to highways,
Yeah.
because I know, for instance, you can advertise on the roundabouts, but you have to get a
You
licence.
do have to get licences, and in fact, I think somewhere when we get on to the bit about guidance on advertising, I think I make the point in that document that people will need to approach the relevant authority for, in some cases, licences to do things, or specific, sometimes even planning permission for
Yeah, I
it.
think it might need to
But there
be
are
specific in the individual.
Push it perhaps in here as well.
Happy with it?
Fine.
Fly,
I've got a comment actually. I've gone. No,
Well, one of the things is that some roundabouts which have these sponsorship things are run by independent companies, and they cost a hell of a lot of money to put your banner on there. Now, I don't think our roundabout is part of that scheme, but there are plenty of places that are. I'm just making that as an observation.
my point is that when you come along the 605 to the roundabout as you come in from Peterborough direction, most of the fly posting there is in Ashton, isn't it? Because it's always on the
Yes.
side,
Yeah.
that corner that goes down to.
It definitely is in Ashton.
So, should there be a sort of unified discussion about, like, if we say it doesn't happen on the Amber bit, they have to say, okay,
Well,
we won't put it on our bit then.
I'm sure that if we adopt this, one of the things we might want to do is go to other local parishes. And Ashton would be a very good
they seem
example,
to-
and say,
well,
look,
they
we've
seem-
introduced this, thought you should be aware,
Yeah.
not least because
So
the roundabouts on
I think
your patch.
there are two there at the moment. There are on Ashton.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost invariably at least one somewhere on that roundabout all the time.
Ollie Road is a pretty good voice on that now.
It's just that just so there's consistency in approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We can certainly go on to. Well, I think
You just want
perhaps-
that for the fly posting one, or do you want?
Well, maybe we should let them have a sight of all of them, and just say that we wanted to draw these to their attention.
They might have not objections, but they might have things they can positively add to.
Absolutely.
It. So
And invite them to make any comments on it, and to consider whether they want to introduce anything similar.
Just to Ashton, are we thinking?
Well, I was actually thinking, having raised it, why don't we approach all the immediately surrounding ones? So we're talking about Barnwell, maybe Stoke Doyle,
Gladthorne as well.
Cotterstock, Clapthorne. Oh dear, I'll have to send one of my own drafted documents
To yourself.
to myself to comment on it. I might have to
So I
step
don't
back
think it
from
happens
that.
very much.
But anyway, yes.
Has anybody noticed at the top of Blackpot Lane, the people who stand there, and I don't know if it's on market day, I've not been past up to them, but are they like a
The Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, they
Are
have
they
Jehovah's.
Jehovah's
They've got their
Witnesses?
little bag, that little trolley they bring
yeah,
with all their
and
Christian
they
stuff.
have like
Yeah,
bits
a
set
human
along. And I
board.
just just throwing that in the pot. It's
Yes.
So
just throwing it in the pot because I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I think the reason they're there, they're not allowed to be in the marketplace on a Thursday,
Okay.
because
I just
we
wondered
won't
if
allow
people
it.
know,
So
obviously.
that's why they
So
stand
they
there.
displace themselves to there.
Yeah.
That, of course, is always an interesting thing about planning, isn't it? You introduce something in one area,
Yeah.
and all you actually end up doing is displacing the problem to
I
somewhere
don't think
else.
I mean, they've been there
They've been there
regularly
for a
since
long
I've
time,
been here,
yeah,
so they
yeah.
must
I mean,
have
having
been
said
there
that,
some
that's-
time.
Yeah.
I should hasten to add that, although I used the word problem, I'm not suggesting that necessarily they're a problem. I've never had anybody, for example, come to me and
I think
make
they
any
were
adverse
allowed
comment
to be
about it.
there, were they, or something?
They're
Do
part
you
of
remember
furniture.
that?
No, I can't remember.
I seem to remember.
Some of these things have gone on so long that
Yeah, I seem to remember that they were told they couldn't be in the marketplace, and so I think there was some agreement that they could stand there. So
I didn't
That
know
makes sense to me.
You get human rights stuff going on, and if you said you can't actually do
well, that's what I was
you're
going to say. I don't know whether you
It's
can
just-
stop them
Yeah,
standing there.
exactly.
Can I just mention my concern about fly posting on the bus shelters?
Yes.
Because somebody at the last town meeting was saying how dreadful the council were because somebody was taking posters down that they were sticking on. I stood there thinking, because they do degrade the plastic stuff. The glue stays remain, doesn't it? It just, they never take them away, they're never a temporary thing. And I just feel that I'd like something in our policy about, specifically about sticking.
Well, actually, if you look
It
at
sort of mentions it.
yes, if you look at best practice E, the very last one, no fly posting shall be affixed to anything in a way likely to prevent its removal or to cause damage in the course of its removal.
Yes, but the people who think put them on the bus shelters don't think they're causing any problem. That's my
But
point.
it's simply vandalism.
Yeah, it is really, because it degrades the plastic.
Well, we could always add, I suppose, something specific
fly
in
posts
terms
on
of
bus
best
shelters.
practice, and yeah, literally, why not? We
I
could
think
have
that's worth putting out.
we could have a 6 bus shelters. Under
Oh,
no
yeah.
circumstances
Yeah.
is anything to be affixed to any bus
Absolutely.
shelter.
We won't be accused ever
Yeah,
again.
because we have to clean them at the end of the day.
I think
would
that's
that be
a valid
bus
point.
shelters that are our responsibility, or bus shelters that aren't our responsibility?
How
Because
are the
what if
members-
somebody approaches Stagecoach or whoever does buses and they say yes, that's fine?
Yeah, but they won't.
Well, yes, perhaps we should make
Well,
it clear that it
I'm
relates
just
to
saying.
any in our ownership. But then how does the member of the public
They
know
don't
which
know,
one
I
are
don't
ours? Unless we start putting notices
Putting the
on
fly
each
posts
of
on
them.
the same people.
Well,
So,
all I'm saying,
this is the
yeah,
property of Angletown Council.
Don't put
well,
fly
yeah,
posts.
that's what you'd have to do.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has got permission, we're not going to know that.
No, that's
And then
true.
if we do,
All right, so let's add a 6 which says that there shall be no fly posting on any bus shelters that belong to Angletown Council. And maybe we ought to ask estates to consider whether it is worth spending any money on putting some form of a notice, preferably not stuck in a way that causes damage, to a bus shelter to indicate that it is in fact ours
If
rather
you
than
look
anybody
at the
else's.
reverse of that, you could say Arnold doesn't want anything stuck on any bus shelters because of the way it looks and the...
Or the site, the new site.
I mean, are you saying, Clark, I'm asking this official question
Yeah.
now, is it that, I can't actually see, that we don't clean any bus shelter that doesn't belong to us?
no, we don't.
And do we know which ones do belong to us?
At the moment, well, I can't tell you for definite which ones
Well,
we
I'm
do,
asking for that.
because I don't know whether we even own any.
I'm not sure you-
Certainly none.
We ordered them, because I was the person...
Certainly the one that I'm thinking of that's opposite is it the Greedy Piglet.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
own that.
Yeah,
We
we
don't
don't
know.
know.
Yeah, I
Well,
have a
I
feeling
know
we
for a
might
fact
pay
we
Yeah.
for it. Because
I think
my
there is
recollection
one.
is similar to Councillor Chess's. We
Yeah.
certainly
We
paid
certainly
money for
bought
some
them.
bus shelters.
Yeah, we did.
I
Would
will
it be
find
the one
out.
down the
I will
bottom
find
right?
out. But I don't think we
Because I
own
was
those
made-
bus shelters within the marketplace.
Okay.
Which
Because
is
if you
part
think
of
they've
it.
got all the digital signs.
I mean, if we don't own them,
I know, like the one in the market square, I can remember saying what size we were having, etc.
unless we were simply
We chose
making
them.
Yes, but maybe we're making recommendations to Stagecoach
I'll
as to
com-
what we
I'll
thought was
confirm it.
acceptable. I don't know.
Let's find
What
out.
we'll do is we'll find out what we own, and we can always revisit this issue
Yes.
on another occasion.
Yeah,
So we
I'd
won't
like to.
change it
But
yet.
any issues with any bus shelters that involves any damage, because the reason I know about that one is we've repeatedly contacted Stagecoach to get the broken panel replaced,
Yes,
and it took ages to get that
that
done.
looked bad.
They did do it. They've been out and repaired their digital sign that's in it, but we do not do anything else. We do not touch it.
I suspect this is a very, very complex and muddled area.
It might be
I
very
don't think
I
it
don't
is.
think
'Cause
they know who
I don't think it is, because I think what I will easily be able to do is look at our assets. If it's on, it'll be on
It
our
should be on our
assets,
asset sheet,
Yeah.
of course, you're quite
because
right.
it'll be an asset of ours.
Yeah. And if
But
it
I
isn't,
certainly
then it
don't
would
think
suggest
those
not.
ones.
But
I
you're
know
quite
we
right.
chose them.
We definitely did. And the only thing I wonder is whether Stagecoach
consulted.
asked us what we would
But yes.
like, and we told them. And maybe
Yeah.
that's where the
Yeah.
beliefs come from, that they're
But
actually
I do
ours.
know-
We had to pay for the blooming things to be cleaned and
But I'll double check them.
All right, well, we'll double check that, and the clerk can make sure that that information comes to us, and I suspect estates, whatever the answer is. Right,
Signage.
we're down to 2. Policy on illuminated signs in the conservation area is no more than the policy we already had. I simply put it as a separate standalone document to make it easier for people to find it.
No problem.
But that's been our policy for
Fine.
as long as I can remember, so presumably we re-adopt. There is a long document which is about
Yeah, this
guidance on advertising, which I've tried to put all sorts of things together on the basis that if anybody ever asks us about these sort of issues, we can say, well, here's our guidance document.
That's
And again, we
absolutely
could
good.
publish it on the website.
Yes.
Several of these things I have taken out of kind of other people's bits, but most of it, and I thank Councillor Oates for this, came from a document that was published by the Department for Communities and Local Government a little while ago, and still seems to be the current document, which very helpfully sets out the rules. And all I've done is précis some of that down into that document.
That's why it's
So
so
it's-
detailed. It's got so
So
many-
it pretty largely comes out of that in terms of these 20,
How many points were
whatever,
there?
25 points.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I think in the DCLG document they say there are 9 points, but then most of them have so many sub-points that I just actually numbered them all individually. And then I've put a little summary about various bits and pieces on the end of it.
That's fine.
Again, anybody got any
No, happy.
views,
No.
worries, concerns?
No.
Well,
Right.
as you say, we can visit them any time we like.
They can be, yes. And it might be that a situation arises, we look at this and then think, maybe we should be changing that. Right. Well, it seems to me that we've actually said we've adopted all of those,
Yeah.
or re-adopted as the case may be.
I've put them down as being reviewed and approved,
Yes. Well, I think
as
the first,
apart from the first one.
yes.
'Cause I think that's new, isn't it? Well, it's
Well, the planning guidance document is actually that's been
I suppose
revised
that's-
and approved. The last 5, the policy documents and the guidance on advertising, they're all brand new, so probably just should be
Sorry,
same.
which one's brand new?
Well, the policies on the removal of graffiti, A-boards, fly posting, illuminated signs, and indeed the guidance on advertising, they're all new stuff
Right,
that
okay,
I've
so
put together. So if we simply say that we've adopted those, and then we've reviewed and reapproved the others. Which brings us, happily, to any other relevant matters for report only already. Councillor Chess.
I'm just going to report the fact that I'm pleased to see that the bits of machinery off the side of a certain house in Riverside Close has been removed, and that this is a triumph for the district council.
Thank you for the information. Councillor Humphreys?
No, nothing.
Councillor Fuller?
Just an update. I've spoken at length with Rebecca today about the playground that I keep going on about. Well, they've now put the dog bin in, not in the playground, but there is a dog bin there because it needs to be there. They've put a sign up saying the playground, two big metal poles, no kites, no bikes, no dogs, and no something else. And it's that playground, if anyone's seen it, is for 3 to 14-year-olds, which I'm quite surprised at really. But there was an incident with a small child, because it isn't railed off, as you know, and Rebecca's still pursuing this, as with this man, Kevin, is it Kevin?
Kevin Murphy.
Kevin Murphy. He's pursuing it because, although you don't have to have railings around a playground necessarily, a small child, 3-year-old, ran across the road onto Hillfield Road, off the playground. I was walking through with the dog. Her father called her. She immediately started to shoot back over the road, and a lady in a car coming up saw me go like that and slowed down. She hit her. So it's not safe. It's just an update for you all. Okay.
Thank you for your continuing efforts.
I'm just keeping an eye on it all the time. Being attacked by residents. I don't think there's that. No.
I don't have any either, I don't think. Does the clerk have anything? In which case, I'm happy to say that inside of the hour,
Yes.
I call the meeting closed.
Well done.
Record, just what I did twice.